These are the best revision techniques that will get you top marks in your exams. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name's Ahmed and I'm a year 13 student studying for his A-levels, and in this video I'll talk to you about the best revision techniques to get top grades in your is timestamped, so for those of you who like to skip around, feel free to do so. And without further ado, let's get into the rest of the tips, with tip number 3 being the most effective for you. So the first tip is super simple but sounds much harder than it actually is, and that is to compartmentalize your time. And what I mean by this is to break up the day into times of the day that you know you'll study and others that you know you won't. So for me at least, I need 2 hours after school to not do any single piece of schoolwork. I want to relax and reset. So in those 2 hours, it'll be the worst possible thing for me to study, but then 7 to 10 p.m. I might be the most productive I've ever been. That time I know peak studying, peak performance is going to happen there, and that's where I want to start studying. So yeah, essentially that's all that it is. It sounds super difficult, but it's not. Just try and think about your day, think about all the activities you have, and then just delegate times and tasks to certain times of the day that you'll know you'll be more productive in. Whereas if you try and do your homework half an hour before you go to bed, you know you absolutely won't understand any of it or actually get it done as fast as you could, whereas if you did it 5 hours early. So for this next tip, I'm going to put on my time management glasses over here and yeah, essentially talk to you about the top time management techniques that you should use to get ahead in sixth form. So you can really approach studying in sixth form in one of two ways. Either you do really long study sessions with no breaks and get a lot of work done, or you can approach using shorter time techniques. So essentially what some people do is use the pomodoro technique. You might have heard of it already. It's using the 25-5 rule, which is 25 minutes of studying and then you take a 5-minute break. Another 25 minutes of studying and a 5-minute break, another 25-5, and essentially you do that until you run out of work or you finish for the work. Instead, what I found works much better is using something called the 60-10 rule. So how I like using the 60-10 method is essentially, it's really simple. So all you do is you study for 60 minutes and then you take a 10-minute break. Then you study for 50 minutes, you take a 10-minute break. Then you study for 40 minutes and you take a 10-minute break. Then you study for 30 minutes and you take a 10-minute break. Then you study for 20 and take a 10. Then you study for 10 and take a 5, and then you're done. Essentially, you'll have a lot of breaks in between, but what it means is you won't lose focus, and every time you study, it'll be less time that you have to study. So obviously, you want to get your harder tasks done first in those first 60 minutes, and then after a long period of time when you're losing focus, you'll only have 10 or 20 minutes left to study, and then after that, it's much shorter, and you can get little tasks done towards the end. Next tip is active learning. Active learning is all about using study techniques that help you revise actively. Well, of course it is. But what do I mean by this? So essentially, active study techniques include stuff like flashcards, past papers, etc. And we'll come to this later. But it's stuff that makes you think and makes you work, whereas passive study techniques such as highlighting and reading, you don't necessarily actually understand the content you're learning. But in active techniques, what you want to do is actively revise. So you go on and you search a video about your topic and you try and understand it. Whereas passive, again, you don't really understand it, you just memorize it and hope that you can blurt it out on the day of the exam. So yeah, if you start using active learning techniques like flashcards, which I have a video on this channel I think about, or if not, I will be making one very soon, and past papers, which is another video I'll be making very soon, then if you use those study techniques instead of highlighting and rereading your notes a lot, then you'll find that you'll end up doing much better in exams because you'll actually have understood the information. Whereas with the other techniques, you would have more so memorized it, but it might have just been forgotten like a few days later. The penultimate tip is past papers, something that I talked about in active learning, and past papers are my absolute best friends now, and that honestly sounds so sad, but it's true. Something I did not do as much in year 12 is do past papers, and honestly at the start of the year my grades really suffered because of that, but they completely change your life. You're actively doing the question like active learning says, and then you're understanding how the mark scheme wants you to write stuff when you mark it. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So in chemistry, we're learning about organics, right? So I've done this past paper already, this one on chirality, which is a part of organics, or the things that we're learning. And when I first did that paper, there were loads of questions that I did not understand at all. So I did the paper, I found the stuff that I didn't really understand, and then went to the mark scheme. Then I saw how the mark scheme wanted me to answer it, and almost certainly after that point, a lot of the theory just clicked for me. And after I understood how the mark scheme wanted me to answer it, a load of the same types of questions came up in other past papers I did. And essentially in this tip, past papers allow you to do the question, and then when it comes up again in another format, you'll already have the means of answering it because you've done it before. So now, whereas I've already done this paper, I'm going to do it again, and this is in between a week. So I won't really remember the answers, but essentially I'll remember how to approach the marking, or how to approach and think like an examiner. So for those longer questions, I'll be able to be more concise, and for the shorter questions, I'll be able to write those mechanisms or equations much quicker. The last tip that changed my sixth form experience and made it much easier was doing regular reviewing. Try and review all the content that you learn in school as regularly as you can. I would say as soon as you do it in class, come back home and try and review everything you did that day, and automatically your life will be so much easier when it comes to those end of topic, end of year exams or actual A-levels. So yeah, this tip applies to anyone, but it's honestly just review as regularly as you can. Whereas if you're even in the middle of the topic and the rest of you haven't reviewed as much, just come back home and review the stuff that you did in that lesson specifically. Because even if you've reviewed a one part of the topic more than you reviewed the rest, it'll stick in your brain for longer. And another part of reviewing regularly that you need to remember is that you don't want to stop at just reviewing it once. What you want to do is come back to it a few days later, and then a week later, and then like a few weeks later after that. Actually, when you come back to the topic and when you review the notes and you just look at what you did in that old lesson, you'll be able to understand it much quicker. It'll be more fresh in your mind, and then when it comes to answering questions in your end of topic or end of year exams, or even if you're in your actual A-levels, then you'll be able to answer the questions much quicker because you'll have more of an understanding of that topic because you've reviewed it regularly more times than if you just reviewed it once and didn't do it as much, and then you don't understand as much either. So that was a bit convoluted, but the only thing I'm saying is in reviewing it regularly, you want to be regular. You just don't want to review it once and then stop. You want to review it as many times as you possibly can. In the end, I really hope those tips helped you guys for having an easier time in sixth form, in GCSEs, whatever you're using those study tips for. And yeah, I really want to thank you for all the support in my last few videos. It's been really cool to see some of them kind of blowing up. And if you haven't already, please feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe to support it further. And that would mean the world to me. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to check out how my A-level setup is like. Maybe that interests you considering you're seeing all the lights on the monitor behind me. But yeah, thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you next week with a brand new video. Bye for now.